Welcome to my channel. I'm Scott, and in this video I'm going to walk you through the process of valuing Intel stock by analyzing their financial statements and dissecting their financial ratios so we can determine if it's a buy or a sell. Let's get started with the model. This is a large cap company, 134 billion market cap. They're trading at $31 a share, and they have 4.3 billion shares outstanding. Intel designs, develops, manufactures, markets, and sells semiconductors and computer-related products. It has 5 segments. The first, client computing group. The second, data center and AI. The third, network and edge. The fourth, Mobileye. And the fifth, Intel Foundry Services. It operates as a foundry and a fabless semiconductor company. Fabless companies design the chips and wafers. NVIDIA is fabless. They're not fabulous, they're fabless. Foundries manufacture the chips for fabless companies. Taiwan Semi is a foundry. They are fabulous, but they're not fabless. Let's take a look at their financials. The way you value a company is you estimate the free cash flows into the future, and then you discount those numbers back to today's value. That's what we're doing in this video. And free cash flow is cash flow from operations minus capital expenditures. Pre-COVID, their free cash flow was up to 23 billion. I think that was a peak. It averaged 20 billion for a few years. It fell to 9 billion in 2021, but then it's been all downhill since then, bleeding cash. In 22 and 23, they bled 25 billion of cash. That's a lot of cash. Sure, Meta bled a lot of cash in the metaverse, but their free cash flow is still really positive, like 30-40 billion a year, because they make so much money on the ad business. But this company is falling apart. Net income is a profit or loss on the income statement. It's revenue minus expenses. 20 billion in 2021, down to 1.7 billion in 2023. It is positive 4 billion in trailing 12 months. Why is net income positive, free cash flow negative? Because free cash flow is operating cash flow minus capex. They're investing a lot into capex. That's why they have negative free cash flow. CapEx is capitalized and depreciated on the balance sheet. Depreciation is an expense that's spread out over a long period of time, so it's spread out on the income statement. Revenue is a sales for the company, and that looks terrible as well. Nearly 80 billion down to 55 billion. It is up from 2023, up slightly. Finally, they're moving up a little bit because they were going down a lot from 21 to 22, then from 22 to 23. They still pay a dividend, a 1.6% dividend, which cost them 2.1 billion. With negative free cash flow, that means they need to take on debt to fund their dividend payment. We estimated 4 years of future free cash flows. We also estimated a terminal value, which is all cash flows past year 4, that's 240 billion. We discounted those numbers back to today using the weighted average cost of capital. We get a value of the company of $157 billion. We divide that by 4.3 billion shares. And we get a calculated stock price of $37. They're trading at $31, so they're trading at a 15% discount. It is a buy according to the model. Their future free cash flow estimates are given by the company, also by analysts. So this is their expected future free cash flows in 24, 25, and 26. I projected their 2027 free cash flow, and they were averaging about $20 billion from like 2017 to 2020. If they can get back to those levels, a little worse actually, they still seem undervalued, but they have to get back to positive at some point. I do not think they're going out of business, so I think it could be a good investment. I just lost faith in the company. I did own them, I lost like 20%, and then I sold my stock and moved on. There are 64 companies in the same industry as Intel, and if they have a number in red, they're worse than the median. If they have a number in blue, they're better. They're spending a ton in CapEx, almost as much as Taiwan Semiconductor. They're really going all in on the foundry business. I hope it pays off. I'm just not sure it will, because it's really expensive to manufacture in the US. To manufacture in Taiwan is much more cost effective. They still have a pretty good debt to equity ratio, 0.5. For every dollar of equity, they have 50 cents of debt. They pay a nice dividend, 1.6%, equal to the median. They're bleeding cash, as we talked about earlier. Negative 10 billion of free cash flow. Hopefully this investment pays off in the future. It looks like they rank 6th in market cap. They should be number 6, not number 8. They have the best price to book. They're trading at 1.3 times book value. Price to book is stock price over book value per share. We cannot look at their PE or price to free cash flow. Negative earnings, negative free cash flow. They're trading at a little better than 4 times revenue, so that should be blue because the median is 4.2. I'm getting a little lazy with my color coding. They still generate a lot of revenue, 53 billion. They were generating the most revenue for a long time, until about a year ago, Nvidia took them over. Now Taiwan is ahead of them. And their 5-year annual revenue growth rate is negative. They're going in the wrong direction. Look at Nvidia. I guess they do deserve to be 3 trillion. They're growing like gangbusters. If you put $10,000 into this company 10 years ago, you'd have $12,000 today, a 2% annual return. Not a good return. That's assuming you reinvested the dividends back into the stock. Let's go through their latest 10Q. We'll start with their income statement. First quarter of 23, first quarter of 24. Revenue is up. Finally, it's going up. $11.7 billion to $12.7 billion. A decent growth, $1 billion. So 1 over 11.7. That's a growth between 8 and 9%. Let's get a breakdown of the revenue so we know what it is. Here's a nice comprehensive breakdown of their revenue. Of the $12.7 billion, $7.5 billion is in client computing group. These are the semiconductor chips that go into desktop computers. They sold $2.5 billion in the first quarter, up from $1.9 billion. Semiconductors that go into notebooks, $4.7 billion, up from $3.4 billion. Other $400 million. So that's a big segment, $7.5 billion. Data center and AI, $3 billion. That's up a bit, almost flat. Network and edge, $1.4 billion. That's down. Foundry is down, $4.8 billion to $4.4 billion. That's where they're spending all the money in CapEx. So that's not good to see that it's down. Altera, $340 million. Here they talk about Altera. Altera is an Intel company. It used to be known as Intel's Programmable Solutions Group. It's a standalone business, so it operates independently of this company. And it's been a standalone company since the first quarter of 2024. The numbers for Altera used to be combined with data center and AI. Altera is a manufacturer of PLDs, programmable logic devices. It was founded 41 years ago in 1983, but they were acquired by Intel in 2015, 9 years ago. And as of the first quarter of 2024, Intel made them an independent company, so they can focus on FPGA, Field Programmable Gate Array. Altera became a public company in 1988. Intel paid a pretty penny for this company, almost $17 billion in cash. You cannot invest in Altera. It's not an independent, publicly traded company. They are independent from Intel, but they're not separate in that respect. You could invest in Mobileye. Mobileye has a market cap of $17 billion, $21 a share. Mobileye is an Israeli autonomous driving company. They develop self-driving technology and advanced driver assistance systems, including cameras, computer chips, and software. They were acquired by Intel in 2017, so the stock was taken off the market in 2017. Then it was put back onto the market in 2022. This company was founded in 1999 by a professor at Hebrew University. That's pretty cool to be a professor and then start a company like this. Intel paid $15.3 billion for Mobileye. That was the biggest acquisition of an Israeli tech company. Let's go back to their revenue breakdown. $13 billion of revenue, but they have an operating loss of $1.1 billion. They have an operating loss in both Altera and Mobileye. All their gains are in their Intel products. $2.6 billion in client computing, data center and AI, $480 million, network and edge, $184 million. Let's go back to the income statement. Their cost of revenue, all the expenses directly tied to generating a revenue, is $7.5 billion. Revenue minus cost of revenue gives you your gross profit, $5.2 billion, up from $4 billion. They spend a lot on R&D, $4.4 billion. R&D is 34% of their revenue. Last year was 35%. Gross margin improved 7%. It was 34%, now it's 41%. Marketing, general, and administrative, $1.6 billion, 12% of their revenue, up from 11%. Restructuring and other charges, $348 million. That's nearly 3%. It was 1/2 of 1% last year. An operating loss of $1.1 billion. It was $1.5 billion. So their loss is getting smaller, 8.4%. Last year, 12.5%. They had a gain of $200 million from their equity investments in other companies. It looks like they're earning money on their cash. Interest and other is $145 million. Loss before taxes of $700 million. They had a gain of $282 million in taxes, so a net loss of $430 million. A lot better than last year, a net loss of $2.8 billion. Loss per share is much better. It was 66 cents, now it's 9 cents. Here's a nice visual of their revenue growth from 1Q23 to 1Q24. It grew $1 billion, $1.8 billion from CCG. Our revenue was $12.7 billion, up $1 billion or 9% from Q1 2023. Client Computing Group, CCG, increased 31% due to higher notebook and desktop volumes. Average selling price for notebook and desktop were flat. Data center and AI increased 5%, and that's from higher average selling price, ASPs. But everything else is down. Next, down $100 million. That decreased 5% due to the reduction from 5G customers. Next stands for Network and Edge. Altera revenue decreased 58%. Mobileye decreased 48%, and their foundry business decreased 77%. I hope these other business units pay off. It's mostly detracting from their revenue and profits. It's doing the opposite of what they hoped. Let's take a look at their statement of cash flows. The first section is operating cash flow. That was negative $1.2 billion. Last year was negative $1.8 billion. It's better this quarter. They have a smaller net loss. They spent $6 billion this quarter on CapEx, last year $7.4 billion. In their financing section, they added $800 million of commercial paper. That's short-term debt. They added $2.5 billion of long-term debt. They paid $500 million of dividends, last year $1.5 billion. So the cash at the end of the period, $6.9 billion. You can see that right here. And this is how you close out the statement of cash flows. Let's go to the balance sheet. You'll see the $6.9 billion on the balance sheet in cash. That's how you connect the balance sheet to the statement of cash flows. Let's take a look at their first quarter PowerPoint slides. Lots of big things in the pipeline for this company. The Intel 7, Sapphire Rapids, and Emerald Rapid. Intel 7 means Intel 7nm, nanometer. It's one of the latest process nodes in production. It offers lots of improvement in silicon utilization and efficiency. 4nm are smaller transistors, which means you could fit more transistors in the same space when you compare that to the 7. EUV is extreme ultraviolet lithography. It's a new technology used in the semiconductor industry for the manufacturing of integrated circuits. When you compare Intel 4 to Intel 7, Intel 4 has 20% more power efficiency and twice the area density. That's a claim coming directly from Intel. I thought only Taiwan Semiconductor and Samsung are using 3nm, but apparently Intel is using it as well. According to Intel, Sierra Forest transforms AI workloads into modern data centers. Also Intel 20A, 18A, and 14A. They expect to have the 14A done by 2027. It will be the first in the industry to have a high NA EUV. So this year they have 18A and 20A. Also this year Intel 3 and 4, as well as 7 and 16. But they have stuff in the pipeline. UMC 12, that'll be in the near future. At their Foundry Direct Connect event, they plan to be number 2 among foundries by 2030. Taiwan Semi will always be number 1. When you see Intel 7, that's not 7 nanometers. Intel really emphasizes equivalence. And they always point out that Samsung and Taiwan Semi offer less efficient products than Intel. Intel semiconductors are much denser and much richer. If all goes to plan, the Intel 20A and 18A will enter production this year. This article is from 2024. And they'll be able to focus on the next nodes. And when they do that, they should be able to regain their leadership. That's a big statement. They've been lagging for over a decade now. The Intel 14A is due to go into production as early as 2026, with products available between 2026 and early 2027. And I wouldn't believe this unless I saw it in writing, but they're going to be working on a 1 nanometer equivalent, which is just mind-boggling to think about. That's the Intel 10A. The 10A should go into production between mid-2027 and mid-2028. It's really all talk now. They need to execute on their plans. The AI Intel Foundry business. 5 packaging designs with over $15 billion in value. If they can execute on this, it's a game changer. Here's their Q1 highlights: 12.7 billion of revenue, up 9%. Gross margin 45%, and EPS 18 cents. We saw this earlier when we looked at their income statement. They have 5 segments. The first 3 are CCG, Data Center and AI, and Network Edge. They have Intel Foundry, and then all other. Excluding Intel products, revenue is down in every category, so is operating income. I think we saw Mobileye and Altera were down like 50 or 70% when you compare it to the first quarter of 2023. Here's their revenue the last 5 quarters. Q4 2023 was 15 billion, so they're down from Q4, but they're up from Q1 2023. Gross margins are looking good, 45%. It was 38% last year, nearly 50% last quarter. And they do have positive operating income, non-GAAP that is. They have an operating loss on a GAAP basis. The income statement is GAAP. Non-GAAP is when a company strips out things like stock-based compensation. Their biggest segment is Intel products. Of the 12.7 billion of revenue, 11.9 billion is from this segment. Look at margins, 28%, up from 11%. 3.3 billion of operating income, which is equivalent to 2 quarters ago. Last quarter was 4.4 billion. Solid fabless business with strong ecosystem from edge to cloud. Warning, expect strong second half growth with momentum in 2025. They always say next quarter or next year. That's when we'll make a lot of money. Why can't they do it now? When next year happens, there'll be a reason why they didn't hit their goals. Lots of headwinds from interest rates or companies conserving cash because they're concerned about a recession. There's always some excuse, right? Intel products is like 3 separate segments in one. I'll show you in the next slide. You see the 11.9 billion of revenue? These 3 segments make up that 11.9. 7.5 plus 3 plus 1.4. This gives you a little more granularity. In Client Computing Group, 7.5 billion of revenue, 2.6 billion of operating income. Pretty good margins, 35%, up from 20%. It was 40% last quarter. You don't want to compare it to the fourth quarter because generally the fourth quarter is usually a lot stronger than the first quarter, mainly due to the holidays. They plan to ship out a lot of their second generation AI chips in the second half of this year. Now that they're working on Panther Lake, they're set to supercharge thin and light laptops to fight Apple. The company promises a serious upgrade on next-gen Lunar Lake. Then you have Data Center AI, 3 billion of revenue. They also had 3 billion of revenue last year, but had no profit. Now they have $500 million of profit, 16% margin. So that's a big improvement. Their Xeon 6E core ready to ship, and P core should be shipping in the third quarter of this year. They're launching Gaudi 3, that should give them 500 million of revenue in the second half of this year. Intel is saying the Gaudi 3 is 1.3 times faster than NVIDIA's H200. That's for inferencing certain language models. If they're 130% faster than NVIDIA, that means their market cap should be 130% of NVIDIA's, which means Intel should be a $4 trillion company. Makes sense, right? Logical sense. Their next segment, 1.4 billion of revenue, which is lower than last year, but last year they had a loss. Now they have a profit of 200 million. So that's a big improvement, because last quarter it was 1.5 billion of revenue with operating income of 100 million. And they mentioned AI inferencing, a clear catalyst for 2024 edge growth. Now the foundry business, where they're burning all that cash. That's down. It was 4.8 billion last year, 5.2 billion last quarter. Now revenue is 4.4 billion. And they lost 2.5 billion, which is a negative 57% margin. Terrible. They said to expect a big loss in 2024, but the path to break even is in our control. I guess only time will tell. And here's Altera and Mobileye. These are independent companies that are beneath Intel's umbrella. And these look awful. Revenue 340 million. It was over 800 million last year. And the past 4 quarters were profitable. Now they have an operating loss. They're blaming high inventory levels of other companies. Industry-wide inventory digestion continues. These companies always dance with words. Just get straight to the point. Expect $2 billion of revenue in 2024. So $2 billion of revenue is averaging $500 million for the quarter. So they missed $500 million in the first quarter. But in 2023, they had well over $2 billion of revenue. The first 3 quarters were over $2 billion. Mobileye is also down a lot, $239 million. An operating loss in the first quarter when they had a gain the prior 4 quarters. They're blaming inventory digestion. That's when you eat inventory and digest it. They expect the business environment to accelerate after the first quarter of 2024. The growth is always in the future. Here's their outlook for the second quarter. Revenue 12.5 to 13.5. Margin 43.5%. EPS 10 cents. So if they do hit the 12.5 to 13.5, it'll be pretty much flat from the second quarter of 2023. Revenue did grow 9% in the first quarter of 2024 compared to the first quarter of 2023. So if they hit the 13.5, the high end of the revenue number, that'll be about a 5% growth. Here's their Q2 outlook. They expect gross margins to be 43.5%. Up from 40%. So that would be an improvement if revenue was flat, but their margins went from 40% to 43.5%. So that's an improvement of 3.7%. Even if they only had the low end of the revenue, 12.5 billion, and they increased their margins 3.7%, that would give them an additional 460 million of operating income. Here are the 4 quarters for 2023. Revenue went up each quarter, so that's good. It was 10.2 billion. Then it grew to 13.8 billion. This is for Intel products. Total revenue also went up each quarter from 11.7 billion to 15.4 billion. Altera revenue really struggled. That went down a lot from 800 million to 480 million. Mobileye did peak in the fourth quarter of 2023. We saw in the first quarter of 2024 it came back down. Operating income grew at a rapid rate, so they're doing a good job at growing margins, 1.1 billion to 4.4 billion. But this is just their product revenue. They're burning a lot of cash in foundry. 2.4 billion in the first quarter, then 1.9 billion, 1.4 billion, and 1.3 billion. I like to look at GAAP. They had a GAAP operating loss in the first 3 quarters. It was almost break even in the third quarter. But in the fourth quarter of 2023, they had positive 2.6 billion of GAAP operating income. Let's look at the stock on Simply Wall Street. Its last price, 132 billion market cap, down 5% in the past week, down 15% in the past year. Way back in 1990, you could have bought this stock for under $1. That's stock split adjusted. It never was actually $1. It was probably like $20, but after all the stock splits, it appears as 98 cents. This company and Microsoft are responsible for the PC boom. Microsoft supplied the software, and this company supplied the semiconductor chips. And companies like IBM supplied the actual computer. But the computer is just a box. The value of the computer are the semiconductor chips, and of course the software. And then it came down a lot from 2000 to 2002, down like 80% or so. And it's a real roller coaster ride. It almost got back to its all-time high in 2021. Also in 2020 it got kind of high. It almost hit 70 in 2021. Then it came down a lot, below 30 in 2022. And it was looking good by the end of 2023. And then it kept reporting weak earnings, and the stock came down. Could be a good time to get it. I just don't like this company anymore. They're losing too much market share. Just a few months ago in December, it was 50. In 7 months or so, it's down about 40%. July 1st, it hit 30, and then it looked promising because it started growing again, but then it came right back down. Within a 1 month time frame, it went from 30 to 35, back down to about 31. Simply Wall Street's valuation is $7. Look at that. They say it's 300% overvalued. 39 analysts priced this stock at 39, so they say it's undervalued. Their revenue was almost 80 billion in 2021. Now it's down to about 50 billion. The forecast is 68 billion by 2026, which is still a lot lower than 2017, 18, 19 levels. But if they improve their margins, it could be a good stock. A lot of assumptions need to happen for this company to be a good stock again. The free cash flow forecast is negative in 24, 25, and 26. So my model assumes they'll get back to positive free cash flow by 2027. So their revenue is back to 2013 levels. It was a little over 50 billion in 2013. Their free cash flow peaked at 22 billion in 2020. It was still pretty strong in 2018, 12 billion. You can see ever since mid-2022, they've just been burning cash. Debt of 13 billion in 2013, and then it's been pretty much growing each year. Now it's 52 billion, that's a lot of debt. But their equity is always a lot higher than their debt. 110 billion of equity, which is a little more than double their debt. And they do have a lot of cash, plenty of cash to service the debt, 21 billion of cash. Even if you pay 6% interest on the debt, that's 3 billion of annual interest. But they have negative free cash flow, so they have to keep taking on debt to fund the interest payments on their debt. When the debt is due, they don't have to pay the principal, they could just refinance the debt, maybe at a higher rate, because I don't think they'll have enough cash to pay down the principal, unless they get north of 15 billion of free cash flow, which obviously is not going to happen anytime soon. A lot of people like this stock for the dividend. It was 2.5% in 2014. It got up to 5% in 2022 because the stock came down a lot. But they cut their dividend. It's now 1.5%. And the forecast is 1.7% by 2026. For the past decade, they were growing their dividend payment, but then they cut it a lot. The annual dividend went from 146 to 50 cents. I think it's easier to look on a quarterly basis. They grew their dividend from 22.5 cents up to 36.5 cents. Then in 2023, they cut it to 12.5 cents. And they paid 12.5 cents to pass 5 quarters. They probably should cut their dividend to zero, but I think they're scared the stock price will tank. So they don't want to do that. Because the stock price tanks, then it's more expensive for them to issue stock. You want to issue stock when your stock price is really high. You want to buy back stock when your stock price is really low. The CEO's salary is around 1 million each year. It was 1.3 million in 2022. Pat Gelsinger has been CEO for 3.4 years, total compensation 17 million. Pat worked at this company in the 1980s. He was a chief technology officer from 2001 to 2009. He left in 2009 and was CEO of VMware. He was also the president and chief operating officer of EMC. EMC was acquired by Intel in 2016, but he stepped in as CEO of Intel in 2021. So he's been CEO for 3 years. A lot of people respect Pat, and I think people are hoping he'll bring the company back to where they were. He was a big part of this company when they were the leader in the 90s and early 2000s. In the past year, a lot of insider buying, mostly by Pat. He bought a lot of shares in the 30s. He also bought some in the low 40s. 2/3 of the company is owned by institutions, 1/3 by the general public. Vanguard is the biggest shareholder at 9%, then BlackRock, State Street, Capital Research, Geode, PrimeCap, UBS. Amundi, the French asset manager, State Farm Insurance, Eaton Vance. They employ a lot of people, 108,000 in 2013. It peaked at 132,000 in 2022. They laid off some people down to 125,000. The ticker trades in a lot of places, the Nasdaq, Lima Bolsa, Mexican Bolsa, Swiss, Deutsche Börse, Stock Exchange of Hong Kong, Zitra, Swiss, Santiago, Borsa Italiana, London Stock Exchange, Wiener Börse, Kazakhstan, Bulgaria, Santiago, BATS Europe, Buenos Aires, the Sao Paulo Bolsa, and NEO. I think it'll be fun to read some of the reviews on Yahoo Finance. There are probably thousands of comments. I'll read through a bunch of them, and I try to read verbatim. So if I sound idiotic, it's not me, it's the person who wrote the review. On Yahoo Finance, you could select whether you're bullish or bearish. So this person is bearish. We are about to assist in the largest recall in history. I would sell before it goes public. It is public. Oh, whether the recall goes public. I think that's what they mean. And here's somebody who responded to this person. Please put your money where your mouth is. Back up the truck and short away. Intel's big balls in Taiwan Semi's face. Intel is spending a lot of money in their foundry business, trying to compete with Taiwan Semiconductor. Taiwan Semiconductor is the largest foundry in the world. Intel is handling the Gen 13 and 14 stability issues poorly. It is damaging its reputation for consumers, data centers, and potential foundry customers. Somebody responded to the OP. Tom's Hardware is making a big deal about this. Intel has a software fix and is offering to replace chips with an issue. No one cares about this except the Tom's Hardware nerds, LOL. Tom's Hardware is a website, tomshardware.com. It's a place people can go to review a company, also read articles and different resources. The information focus is on the computer industry. Come on, man, I'm sure thousands and thousands of people have read that article. Of course, there are at least 200 million people that will get a new PC this year. Most underestimate the scope and scale of the business. Let's move on to the next review. A too big old stalwart of a company. Zero value in buying Intel paper. I didn't know they sold paper. I thought they sold semiconductor chips. Intel 10 years ago was $34. The dividend is lower than 10 years ago. There are no stock splits since the year 2000, and that was a 12th split and last split. Dividends are underwater. I've been telling friends to buy AMD and Nvidia. Why would anyone own this stock? Why? It will take 11 more years just to get back to the year 2000 price. It was almost at the 2000 price 2 years ago, or maybe 3 years ago. And that's a big maybe, a total long shot. Here's a reply to that comment. The stock price was over 60 just 4 years ago, and I would bet it hits 60 again sooner than 4 years from now. So there you go, boss. I bet there's 3 more splits in the next 20 years. This is a good retort. Reverse splits. If people are interested in seeing the scope of the problem, read Reddit Intel and other subreddits. Lots of people talking about it. Worse is the spreading talk of not buying Intel chips anymore. So Intel needs to get a handle on this right quick. This is not a minor problem. Maybe only a small amount of chips are affected. We don't know for sure, but the bad word is spreading fast and unchecked. That is not good for chip sales moving forward. Jerry Seinfeld. Why would they put out chips they knew to be defective? They would have had to know they were defective. Was it a matter of grabbing the sales and cleaning up the mess later? Do not know if they knew they were defective right away, but they knew eventually, and that spells potential lawsuit and large recalls. They were letting these chips take way too much power to boost stats. Sounds like a third grader wrote that. Roughly what percent of the processors that Intel sold in the past 3 years are effective? 1%, 2%, 5%? Does anyone have a guesstimate? Also, is the problem limited to processors made on Intel 7, or does it impact Intel 4? I stopped building my own PCs many years ago. Wow, he built his own PCs. I am unable to appreciate the scale of the problem that is being discussed. Thank you in advance for your input. That was a nice ending. K-series 13th and 14th gen CPUs are in desktops, not laptops. I would guess less than 1%. Hopefully Intel gives us a better number. The concern is a new finding that there were some bad fab lots. Perhaps the devices don't even fail at the lower power current levels in laptops. There are way too many unknowns at this time. Jerry Seinfeld. What is the deal with airplane food? I would think if Intel was going to have a bad report, they would have pre-warned to get ahead of it. The last report was so bad it should make this one look better. Am a little concerned about Foundry progress, with them replacing the Foundry head guy with someone from Micron. Intel hired Naga Chandrasekaran to lead Foundry manufacturing and supply chain. That's what that poster is referring to. The previous person, Kevin Esfarjani, retired from the company after nearly 30 years. At least he wasn't fired. Here's a reply to Jerry. The existing guy retired, and they brought someone from the outside. It makes sense to inject some new blood given IFS new profit center mandate. Isn't it much more fun reading these than going through the 10Q and 10K? Also, it's not just a foundry. The new guy leads all operations, including supply chain. Donald J. Trump will win by a total landslide in November with 4 exclamation points. Somebody replied to that comment, "You are not bright, are you? Please come and pick up your wife, mom, and daughter. We are all done with them, but they won't leave and begging for more." That's a well-crafted response. Blow me like your wife, mother, and daughter do. Ouch! He got him back. Point match Paul. Intel's earnings and revenues on their quarterly reports will make their stock skyrocket. Get ready for $250. And that's by Gordon Gekko. So I would buy the stock if he's saying it. Bernstein's recent is 35. What is more, analysts know Intel's plan. There is nothing new we do not know. One of the most respected metrics in the biz is Lynch's peg ratio. Go for it. Okay, that's not really related to Intel, but sure, I'll take it. Good old Intel and IBM, a couple of dinosaurs plodding along next to the gazelles. Some dinosaurs are pretty agile and nimble, actually. That is true. Businesses are not doing as good as the news says they are. I think I lost some brain cells reading this last sentence. Truth be told, corporate bankruptcies are soaring. Bankruptcies, SIES. What a joke you are. Intel is getting tens of billions from the government from the CHIPS Act, LOL. The CHIPS Act is the government's way to keep semiconductor manufacturing in the US. And Intel is the biggest US semiconductor manufacturer. The White House said Intel has been awarded up to $8.5 billion in CHIPS Act funding as the Biden administration ramps up its effort to bring semiconductor manufacturing to US soil. Intel can receive an additional $11 billion. They lost about $20 billion of free cash flow in 2023. Now we know where it comes from. The taxpayer's pocket. Why is Intel that low compared to other chip makers? Because of huge debt, and they were left in the dust. The stock has to wash out before it can go up. When Intel slowly takes manufacturing from Taiwan Semi, the company will become a force to reckon with. Intel is wrongfully undervalued at the moment. Smiley face. Sounds like a happy guy. Intel's 14th and 13th gen CPU instability issue has disrupted the supply chain massively as consumers rush towards getting a refund, as a report shows that return rates have grown by 3 or 4 times in a short period. But no worries, keep buying the dip, it's only your money. I sense a little sarcasm in that. Right, a 3x return rate that was exceedingly small to begin with. So what does that mean? 3 to 4 in 1,000 rather than 1 in 1,000? The horror show of all Intel recalls is on the horizon. The entire 13 and 14th gen i9 lines are having a pretty serious voltage problem. Costs could be billions. Intel can afford it, but it does not bode well that this kind of a thing was allowed to occur or was not detected. Will Intel beat next week? It's the guidance that people want. If both are good, it could still go down. LOL. I'm holding, so that's probably why. So far, analysts are expecting a negative report. That is why stock is pulling back. I'm going to reset the order to the top comments. So some might be old, but I think top comments mean it got a lot of replies, or I guess likes. I live in Chandler, Arizona, minutes from the Intel Ocotillo campus. Fab 42 started operations in 2020. Fab 52 and 62 are 2 more plants being built in tandem. The construction site is extremely impressive, only being able to view it from a mile away. A massive operation in full swing. It's no wonder they lost $7 billion last year, not including Ohio and Europe. Fab 52 evidently will come online the end of 2024, and Fab 62 the end of 2025. I would consider a position at some time before end of year. Undervalued, my opinion. Intel is headed toward both producing their own and also manufacturing other companies' AI chips. They do not have to completely dominate either industry to make a lot of money. That is true, that's a good point. So this is a change in strategy to try to catch up with the industry leaders. The money is in the AI software. I hope Slimy Pat sees this as an opportunity to leverage AI chips. Dun dun dun. For those people not familiar with accounting rules on depreciation, the notional loss on foundry would look bad. Those who have real estate will know what depreciation means to the free cash flow. It just adds dollar for dollar into free cash flow, as it is really not cash out of the books, but meant for future replacement of building and equipment. But it is cash out of the books. They spent the cash today. They may have taken on debt, but the cash went out the door. The income statement is not cash. The income statement uses depreciation, but it helps to take tax loss, as one can take the depreciation straight out of operating profit. That is true. Intel has been very smart about this. They are taking major depreciations opportunistically, so they pay very less taxes on the ton of profits, but report lower taxable profits and use the tax savings to invest in new plants. Yeah, I also hear about writing off inventory, and then whatever we sell, it is for 100% profits. Is that right? No, that's not right. It's not 100% profit. I guess it could be 100% profit, but that's pretty unlikely. Let's say your revenue is 100K. Cost of goods sold is 40K. Your gross profit is 60K. Let's say you have a ton of depreciation. You have 60,000 depreciation. And pretend you have no other expenses. So your pre-tax income is 0. because gross profit of 60,000 minus depreciation of 60,000. So taxes 0. So net income is 0. I guess in this example, it's 100% profit. Well, not 100% because you did have COGS, but you don't have to pay any taxes on your gross profit. But let's say you had normal depreciation, say it was 10,000. So your pre-tax income would be 50,000. Let's say you pay 30% of taxes, which 15,000. So your net income would be 35,000, but you would have $15,000 less in this example because you had to pay that amount of taxes. By the way, fabs are investment intensive. This is very true. Intel only used their fabs mostly for internal consumption. Now, CEO has given a clear glide path on the foundry business to be run as a separate profit center. And no one asked you to invest to show you the money. Just stated facts, that's all. So, what are all the numbers you are boasting about? To show your CFA credentials? This person is definitely not a CFA. If not for the money, what are you trying to say? You are a good bean counter? You have plenty of them here? We don't need another one. People underestimate the fact that US needs the chip industry in order to keep their military and technological edge. Apple, Microsoft, Amazon, Meta, Google, Nvidia will all manufacture their chips both at Intel and Taiwan Semi. Diversification is a requirement, not an option. Intel has to put all the stuff that is required for an outside company to make their chips at IFS. They are starting from scratch. Well, not scratch. They've been a foundry for a long time. Now they're just leaning into it more. That takes time. I believe Intel has been working on it for 2 years, at least. You mean they haven't been? Mantra Man made it sound like they're new to the foundry business, but they're not new. They've been a foundry for a long time. CNBC just mentioned Intel stock. However, the analysts all have no idea about Intel fundamental changes and do not know the key reasons that AMD was able to gain market share from Intel in the last 4 or 5 years. AMD's success mainly due to Intel failure in 10 nm wafer process development. The 10 nanometer is an upgrade from the 14. But when they use the term 10 nm, that's just a marketing thing. It's not the actual size. 10 nm is definitely smaller than 14 nm, but it's a catch-all, the 10 nm. There can be semiconductors of a lot of different sizes that are referred to as 10 nm. Much of the mainstream financial media still calls AMD and Nvidia chip makers. That's an indication of how little they understand the industry and why they fail to understand the significance of Intel's recent manufacturing accomplishments. Ouch! Kick them while they're down. It drives me crazy when I read that. I wonder how many people know, for example, that Nvidia doesn't make a single chip. They do some manufacturing, but most of it is outsourced. Agree, fabless semiconductor houses is the correct term. Absolutely correct. Intel is now 3 years ahead of Taiwan Semi. Intel will have 18A end of 2024. Taiwan and Samsung are expecting 2027. Intel is about to fly to the moon as everyone migrates to them. One more thing, if Intel Foundry is losing $7 billion per year and Intel is expected to earn $5 to $6 billion in 2024, this means that Intel products are being very profitable. In addition, Gaudi 3 will increase data center AI sales and AI PC will increase client computing group sales. So Intel will be very profitable in the future with 18A and 14A nodes, being the most advanced nodes in the market, inking new customers. Well said, PDF, but they're going to lose a lot of cash flow in 2024. They're definitely not going to be cash flow positive. Maybe they'll be cash flow positive in 26 or 27, but definitely not in 24 or 25. Trump just said what we already know, even if Biden stays in office. Hello, the CHIPS Act. This country will have a robust chip fab industry, and that is Intel. Nobody is close to what they can do in the US without prohibitive investment. That is what is somewhat frustrating at this point, is the market refuses to acknowledge that advantage and price the stock accordingly. Oh boy. I also make spelling and grammatical errors when I don't reread what I wrote, but I usually reread it at least 1 or 2 times. Do any of you people here have a clue what it takes to build a fab? Populate it with state-of-the-art equipment, hire competent people and train them to move wafers through the line. I really doubt it. What Intel reported is expected. They are laying the foundation for future production. CEO is taking a long view towards the market. Everything depends on whether or not they can deliver top-tier manufacturing capability that will attract customers. My 45 years in the semiconductor industry says Intel is on the right path. Look at the after-hours volume. At this pace, Intel will easily hit $40 even before earnings. Expect to see 50 by earnings. Intel's 3 nanometer process is now in full production, which means that Intel, Taiwan, and Samsung are basically on par with production. Samsung's yields are rumored to be abysmal. The race is on between Taiwan for 2nm versus Intel 28 process. Nothing has changed with Intel's turnaround and foundry stories. They are delivering new and better products on time. They are all but done with 5 nodes in 4 years. ARM is perceived as having better power efficiency, but this is based on half-truths and misinformation. The folks that really know are aware of this. It is a gift that Wall Street pushed Intel to 30, just like Meta was pushed to 88 to 90 level 2 years back. Look at Meta now, it's over 500. Intel only is up 10% from its recent low. It still has a lot of upside. Hold tight your position, up 30% from its low is very sure, and high probability to go up 50% from this year low at the end of this year. Just looked at the historical data. In short term, Intel is about $10 undervalued. Add to that the importance of having chip security in North America and the billions invested to bring about this security. In 2 to 3 years, the stock will be 3 to 4 times its current value. There has to be some manipulation going on here. They've already pre-booked $15 billion in revenue for 18A, another $10 billion from the CHIPS Act, and $54 billion in current revenues. That puts us close to $80 billion. If they get more customers and take the technical lead next, what am I missing? I don't think you're missing anything. When Intel announces they have $30 billion in IFS sales, analysts and investors will stand up and take notice. You are ahead of the curve. Good way to make money. Plus, Patchy has been buying shares in the open market every quarter, and it's up to 570,000 shares. When a CEO believes that much, I am right behind him, all in. Highlights so far: Intel to invest $100 billion to develop semiconductor fabs across the 4 states in USA. The US will award up to $8.5 billion in grants and $11 billion in loans to expand chip making capacity and capabilities in 4 states: Arizona, New Mexico, Ohio, and Oregon. Additionally, Intel hopes to secure $25 billion in tax breaks. Intel's chip factory in Ireland, Germany, and Poland projects remain on track. Intel's chip factory in Ireland, Germany, and Poland projects remain on track. Intel's chip factory in Ireland, Germany, and Poland projects remain on track. Once those factories are up and running, Intel will become the SMCI of America. SMCI is Supermicro. I think he means Taiwan Semiconductor, because SMCI is in America. Another red day for AMD, negative 3%, while Intel strengthens. Evidence investors are seeing a difference in their future opportunities. The market value gap still has a long way to go, so plenty of opportunity to trade that trend. AMD has a market cap of $100 billion, more than Intel for a reason. Oh, I see what he meant. AMD's market cap is $100 billion more than Intel. I thought he wrote AMD's market cap is $100 billion, and it's well over $200 billion. Intel Q1 midpoint guidance was $12.7 billion. Actual was $12.72, which was up 9% from a year earlier. AMD Q1 midpoint $5.4 billion. Actual $5.5 billion, up 2% year over year. I am not seeing Lisa Su's under-promising and over-delivering. I do not think that's been happening for a while. I wish someone would ask her how that fastest product to ramp to $1 billion in sales is going. Ouch, hitting below the belt. Okay, so that was fun reading the reviews. Let's dig into the history of Intel. They were founded in Mountain View, California in July 1968. They were the largest semiconductor company in the world from 2009 to 2020. In the year 2000, they generated more revenue than the next 4 companies combined. They did generate the most revenue of any semiconductor up through 2023. Now, of course, Nvidia is number 1. The other big semiconductor companies are Samsung, Qualcomm, and Broadcom. What separates Intel from most other semiconductor companies is that it fabricates its products in-house. The bulk of semiconductor manufacturers farm the actual work of creating the products out to foundries, like Taiwan Semiconductor. Intel not only fabricates its own chips, but they do so for other companies. Intel does assemble chips in China, but at their own Intel-owned facility. They also manufacture in the US, as you probably know. About half their chips are manufactured in the US, at facilities in Phoenix, Arizona, Albuquerque, New Mexico, and Portland, Oregon. So their main manufacturing is in the US, second is China, third is Israel. The semiconductor industry uses the term fabless to describe a company that designs and markets its chips while outsourcing the fabrication to a third-party manufacturer. NVIDIA is the largest fabless company by a long shot. In 2007, Apple began using Intel chips exclusively in its Macs. Before that, they were using chips that they designed, that Apple designed. But the Intel chips were better, and they wanted to provide a good product to its customers, so they switched from Apple chips to Intel chips. Before Apple chips and Intel chips, they used potato chips. So from 2007 to 2020, Apple only used Intel chips. But that partnership came to an end in 2020 when Apple announced that its new laptops and desktops would no longer use Intel processors. Instead, the machines were powered by Apple's new M1 chip, because Apple's goal is to be vertically integrated, or as much as possible. The loss of Apple was a huge blow to this company, which is why their revenue has been declining over the years. In Intel's 2020 annual report, they said the company's biggest challenge would be dealing with the loss of revenue from customers like Apple. Intel's co-founder, Gordon Moore, lends his name to the most famous observation in technology. In 1965, Moore's law states that transistor density doubles every 2 years. Not only is that observation true, but Intel has officially incorporated the law into its company strategy. In 2020, the company announced it had doubled its combined 14 nanometer and 10 nanometer manufacturing capacity in just a few years. This enabled Intel to expand its line of 10 nanometer products and launch its next generation of mobile PC processors. So who's buying all these Intel chips? In 2023, Intel had 3 major customers that were responsible for 40% of their revenue. Dell was 19%, Lenovo 11%, and HP 10%. Thank God for Dell. Hopefully Dell doesn't start making its own chips, because then this company would be in big trouble. Over the years, Intel has shifted some of its focus to smaller devices and embedded systems. Embedded systems refers to chips placed in something other than standalone computers. For example, cars, planes, traffic signals, and factory assembly lines. Intel has a reputation for cutting-edge innovation, but it's also come under a lot of scrutiny by active hedge fund Third Point. Third Point criticized Intel's management for losing market share to its rivals, noting the loss of customers like Apple, Microsoft, and Amazon that were developing their own semiconductor solutions and sending their designs to Asia for manufacturing. Another big hiccup at the company is not retaining some of its top chip designers and leaders who were leaving to go to other companies. Third Point pressured the board to get rid of CEO Bob Swan and replace him with VMware CEO Pat Gelsinger. In September 2022, the company began construction of a massive semiconductor manufacturing facility near Columbus, Ohio. The project takes advantage of billions of dollars in subsidies from the federal government. The Biden administration has highlighted the project as a critical step toward bringing manufacturing jobs back to the US, and a key measure in reinforcing the country's economic and national security. The price tag of this project is an eye-popping $20 billion. But it's expected to bring significant economic benefits to the area. The new plant will eventually create 3,000 Intel jobs, in addition to 7,000 construction workers employed by the project. However, the scope of the project has raised concerns about how it will affect the area's housing market, and local residents have questioned the potential environment impact of the facility. Intel headquarters are in Santa Clara, California. In addition, they maintain a presence around the world, with manufacturing in Israel, Ireland, and China. Intel is compared to Kodak because both were dominant in their industry and both failed to innovate, and both are falling into irrelevance. So who are Intel's main competitors? AMD is definitely a main competitor. Advanced Micro Devices. Similar to Intel, they produce more than just microprocessors. Both companies create motherboards, servers, and other computer-related hardware. In terms of the x86 microprocessor, AMD is Intel's biggest competitor. They have certain specifications and dedicated users that will always stick to one over the other. Products from both companies are similar in price and quality, though Intel's chips are primarily found in the computers of large companies. The competition between Intel and AMD comes down to individuals that build their own computers. Another big competitor is IBM. IBM is one of the first computer companies in the world. Founded in 1911, was the pioneer in computer technology during the 20th century. They developed the ATM, the hard disk, the floppy disk, the magnetic stripe, and many more products. They're one of the 30 companies in the Dow, and also one of the largest employers in the world. IBM used to produce computers using Intel's processors, but they sold off that business, and they're now selling its own servers and mainframes using its own processors, putting itself in direct competition with Intel. IBM launched a program to open source much of its architecture and firmware back in 2013, which attracted many new customers to using its central processing units, stealing market share from Intel. NVIDIA is the fiercest competitor. They're one of the key players in the GPU market. They are easily the biggest name in video games. It also designs chips for mobile phones and automobiles. Many of its chips are used in supercomputers, and it has taken the lead on AI. Samsung is a well-known large conglomerate with many divisions. For a couple of decades, Intel had the most revenue of any semiconductor company. Actually, in 2018, Samsung took number one. Intel won it back in 2019, up through 2023. Now it's NVIDIA. But Intel and Samsung do not compete in all fields. Intel's products primarily focus on desktops and laptops. Samsung's focus is on smartphones and data centers. So I hope you like this new format of the video, digging a little deeper into other things. Thanks for watching. Like, subscribe, comment. Talk to you soon.